Hello, fictional. Welcome to the crossover what ifs. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Shigaraki, Himiko and Lady Nagant? Part 1. Huge shout out to NeonZangetsu for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. You alright there, kiddo? Then Shimura blinked. Once. Twice. Thrice. He blinked up at the shadow that had fallen over him. What else could he do? He was just a boy, after all. So many people had walked by him on the street. Not a single one had stopped to ask if he needed help. One after the other. No one had reached out a hand to him, if anything they went out of their way to avoid him. Pretending he wasn't there. Acting like he didn't exist. All the while Tenko kept scratching. Until now. Now, as the owner of that voice crouched down before him on the sidewalk, a tiny ray of sunlight pierced the hollow expanse of his mind. Someone had noticed him. Even as the crowds parted on either side of them, his attention didn't waver. Bright blue eyes remained fixed upon his, sapphire-piercing scarlet. Hey. They tilted their head. Are you alright? Did something happen? He found himself looking upon a strange man, more a teenager really, clad in strange orange and black clothes. Bright blue eyes crinkled in a small smile, framed by whiskered cheeks and messed blonde hair. He looked even worse than Tenko felt right now. As if he just fell out of the sky and hit every building on the way down. Maybe he had. His body was covered in dirt and grime, his attire weathered and torn to reveal a mesh undershirt beneath. There was a strange sun-like mark on his right hand. A tattoo or something. Yet for all that his injuries, the young man smiled. Here, lem see your hands. Red reared its ugly head in Tenko's heart. A flash of agonizing memory caught him in its teeth. His hands. Breaking. Cracking. Death. Killing. And no. He recoiled with a yelp. Wait. It's fine. Strong palms closed around his, as an older brother might toward a younger sibling. Nothing's going to happen. Even as cracks spread across his fingers, they healed thrice as fast. Gentle golden light bubbled up, and the damage inflicted by his quirk was immediately undone by what was that, exactly? Regeneration. No, this went beyond that. Almost like something deep inside the blonde scoffed at the injury and erased it. It's going to be alright, now. The stranger smiled, cheeks dimpling. I'm here. Are you lost? Where are your parents? Those words. Those blasted words. Faced with such a sight, with genuine human kindness for the first time in so long, Tenko did what any child in his situation would. He broke. I'm lost. Tenko warbled once and hiccuped. I don't have anything anymore. The tan hand came down on his head, tousling his pale hair. That's alright. His savior laughed. I'm kinda lost, too. No idea where this place is, and really, I've never seen buildings this big before. A weary blue eye looked around, scowling at the crowds that even now ignored the two of them. Don't mind those idiots. We can be lost together. In a quiet aside, he added to himself, once I figure out where here is. Who are you? Tenko's voice faltered a little. Are you one of those heroes? Hero? Me? The blonde man smiled. Nah. I'm Naruto. Just a shinobi. 3 little words. Yet they changed his fate. Not a hero. Not a villain, something else altogether. A hero hadn't come to help him. A villain certainly hadn't. He had. Looking back, Tenko would remember this moment, the very instant. One tiny action, a singular ripple in a world gone cold changed everything. The palm planted itself between his shoulders, guiding him onward. Come on. Let's get you something to eat. Just a shinobi, indeed. His eyes were getting itchy again. There was a part of Tenko, a very loud part, that longed to scratch that itch. To take off the half gloves he'd been given and scratch until he couldn't scratch anymore. But he couldn't. He didn't dare. Why, you ask? Well, it was simple. Elementary, really. You see, Dad had asked him not to. He didn't dare disappoint Dad. Not after all he'd done for them these last 3 months. He'd taken him off the streets, put a roof over his head, provided him 3 meals a day, given him all these toys. Love. Affection. Pride. All he asked was for him to keep these strange gloves on and train with him from time to time. Nothing more. Nothing less. And so he grit his teeth, choosing to focus on the game he'd been given instead. He tried. He really did. Even if he wanted to rip the gloves off and scratch until he was raw. The controller creaked in his grasp as he grit his teeth. No. He mustn't. Had to resist. Dad was always around in some form other, be it in person or in the form of a clone. Sometimes when he was feeling particularly clever, he let Uncle Kurama watch him. Those were good days. Uncle Kurama always got him the best games. Mario Kart was a great one, even if he wasn't very good at it. Maybe he was a bit biased in that regard. Some small part of him knew all this was ill-gotten gains, but so what? Dad stole from criminals for a living. He wasn't a hero. Wasn't a villain, either. He did what he had to do because it kept them safe. Maybe that made him an enemy of everyone. Maybe not. Tenko wasn't sure. Naruto was Naruto. Dad was dad. Just a shinobi. Just a father. As if summoned by that thought, he heard the faint chime of an opening door below his bedroom. "Hey, kiddo." A low voice intoned. "I'm back. Hope you like pizza." Tenko shot to his feet. Naruto had no idea how to raise a child. There it was, the unspoken truth that had hobbled him for the last 3 months now. Life as an orphan may have helped him to empathize with poor Tenko's plight, it certainly encouraged him to take the little lad under his wing. But that was as far as his understanding of the matter went. He didn't know how the first thing about parenthood, much less how to take care of a kid. Why would he? He had next to no experience in the matter. In that regard, he was very much playing it by ear, making it up as he went. And in other matters as well. You did what you had to. It's not your fault. Easy for you to say, Kurama. His jaw clenched a little as he fiddled with a ring of keys. But this still makes me feel dirty. Arg. A hiss tore out of him when he failed to find the right one. Blasted thing. The long day had left his right arm weak again. His knuckles were raw from all the work he'd done. Was it not work well done then, if for a good cause? Technically speaking, he had no known identity in this world. Which meant no ID, which meant an inability to attain a job, which also meant no income and no place to live. Merely taking Tenko out to eat on that first day, all but exhausted what meager funds the boy had. From there, they'd been out of money. But not out of options. Anyone else might have fallen into despair. Anyone who didn't possess the unique set of skills he did. He tried to uphold his moral code as long as he could. And he had. Because you see, the remedy to their plight had been a simple one. If he wasn't willing to rob good people and still wary of this world's hero system, then who could he possibly target? Answer. Villains. More aptly, their ill-gotten gains. He could run faster than light, disguise himself as anyone he pleased, so long as he knew their face. Really it wasn't fair. For them. At last the lock gave, and he swung it back with a triumphant smile. Maybe he'd gone a bit overboard on the whole triple lock thing. Still, better safe than sorry. Tenko. His voice boomed in the open parlor. I'm back. Hope you like pizza. Dad. He heard the door crash open, a blur shot out it, slid down the stair railing, and nearly took out his legs. He swayed in place, balancing the pizza boxes with one hand and steadying him with the other. His ward looked up at him, grinning from ear to ear. Herc. Right in the heartstrings. You're back. The frown rid his face. Of course I am. I said I'd be late tonight, remember? Well, yeah, his ward warbled, but I didn't think you were coming back till tomorrow. Tenko trailed off and buried his head against his knees. Naruto couldn't help but wince at that. He was not cured per se, but better these days. A far cry from the gaunt, emaciated boy he'd blundered into by chance. So long as he didn't bring up the boy's trauma, and he never would. He was certain he could help him adapt. He was getting better. He would be better. He swore it. Speaking of swearing. Did you train today, like I asked? The boy winced. A little. Didn't make much progress. Was this what pride felt like? Pride in someone else. Such a strange feeling. Don't worry about it. Naruto scratched his cheek. Maybe it would be better if I just showed you that trick tomorrow, and really, your bloodline's pretty harmless, so long as you wear gloves. Quirks, they called them. He disagreed. They weren't any different from bloodlines, really. Tenko's was dangerous in the wrong hands, but so long as he used it carefully, he'd be fine. It was merely a matter of control. Hops. Last, he'd been spacing out. I'll have dinner ready in a few minutes. He tousled the boy's hair. Go wash up. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. Alright, can we play some Mario Kart after? Sure, wait. Naruto caught himself nodding, then paused as Tenko raced up the stairs. Just remember to keep your gloves on. The boy shot him a baleful look over his shoulder. Come on, it's like 100C. Tough. A blonde brow rose. Gloves are no games, mister. Tenko rolled his ace and flung up his hands. Fiend. Naruto watched him stomp upstairs. Heh. Guess this is my life now. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Koya could feel himself burning. With each passing sweep of his flames his skin scorched itself, swelling, sizzling and smoking like meat on a grill. It itched and stung, like some creeping disease, gradually leaving him numb. He knew it wasn't sickness. No. It was his quirk. His fire. His flame, burning him the more he used it. Scorching his body as surely as it did the ground of Sokoto Peak. The angrier he became, the more it worsened. What kind of crappy quirk was this? He couldn't even use it properly without hurting himself. Still, he didn't stop training. He couldn't. He refused. I have to be the best. No matter what dad says. I'll show him. I'll show them all. It was all he knew. All he had. All he could. He had to prove himself to dad. He'd be the best hero ever. Better than Endeavor, better than All Might. Than anyone and everyone. He would keep training. No matter what. Wild flames fanned out, annihilating a great tree. Not good enough. He grit his teeth and grabbed the flames with his willpower, obliterating a circle of boulders behind it. Still not good enough. A furious roar escaped him, and his flames blazed in response. The skin of his arms crackled and he bit back a hiss of pain. Push through. Endure. Blaze. Someone clapped behind him. Pretty nice quirk you've got there. Really powerful, too. Toya pivoted without thinking. Bereft of his control, his flames blazed on, scorching the ground at his feet. A young boy wrapped up in dark slacks and a dully navy hoodie stood behind him, clapping jovially, lips parted in a toothy smile. His eyes were a lively shade of red, face pale, hair gone a bluish ash gray. And yet for all that, he didn't show so much as a hint of fear. Maybe it was his age, he looked a little older than him. A bit more confident. Pleased with himself too, as if he'd just found a diamond in the rough. Like was trying to smile even if he didn't really feel it. Who the hell are you? He scowled and ran a hand through his dark hair. Don't interrupt my training. Training, huh? The boy beamed back at him, the very picture at innocence. That's why I'm here. What are you doing in my spot? Toya felt the beginnings of a frown mar his face. Your spot? The hell? I was here first. You really weren't. The boy replied with eerie calm. So? You gonna move or what? A new voice called behind him. Did you make a friend, Tenko? A new figure leaped down from one of the trees, startling Toya terribly. He had time enough to glimpse a worn green cloak contrasted by a pair of black on orange trousers, then they were gone, obscured by the heavy garment he wore. Bright blue eyes blinked back at him, set within a round face framed by whiskered cheeks and tawny blonde hair. The latter was covered in dirt and leaves, yet another sign that he'd been here for some time. Who in blazes were these two? This man, how to describe him? His presence was warm. Sunny, even. For all the dark circles under his eyes, he still granted him a smile. His footsteps had no sound. Strange. He walked as anyone would, yet despite that, he didn't make the slightest noise. Was her a hero then? Maybe a villain. No, a villain wouldn't bother to look after a kid. Something like that just wasn't done. Without thinking, Toya slapped a label on him, just as he did everything else these days. This man smiled at the strangest things, thus he would be called the Smiling Man until he ascertained his name. Don't mind us. The young man held up a hand. We're not here to mess with you. There's plenty of space up here for everyone, right? Tenko kicked the ground, displacing some gravel. But he's in my spot. The blonde brow rose. What did I tell you about sharing? Ugh, died. Come on, don't be like that. He reached down to tousle the boy's hair. I'll take you out for ice cream later. So play nice, eh? Father and son, then. They didn't look a thing like one another. An ugly seed of anger sprouted in Toya's chest. Unfair. They couldn't possibly be related. There was just no way. And yet. He swallowed once, trying to stifle a retort, and failed utterly. A trembling finger rose to point at them. Are you training him? Yup. The blonde's head bobbed. Been doing it for the last few weeks, now. A muscle jumped in Toya's jaw. Is that so? Go on, Tenko. The man nudged him. Show him. Tenko. The boy peeled off one of his gloves and laid a hand upon a burnt boulder, surface still blackened by flame. It didn't so much shatter as it did decay, crumbling in on itself like so much dust. Despite himself, Toya winced. His own cremation was powerful and all, but how did this kid even live? How did he touch anything at all, without it all falling apart? Attaboy. Tenko preened, cheeks flushing at his praise. Toya saw it all. Every bit of it. Not fair. Not fair. Unfair. Dad wouldn't train him. Too dangerous, he said. He knew what he really meant. Unworthy. He never said it, but it was implied. He was already trying to have more kids with mom. Trying to replace him. The boy before him had a quirk even more devastating than his. And still. His dad trained him. His emotions swung into a wretched downward spiral. For a moment, he actually hated the boy before him. The blonde man frowned suddenly. Almost as if he'd sensed it. You alright there? Toya grit his teeth until his jaw began to ache. Fiend, don't worry about me. The hand settled on his dark hair. See, I don't think you are alright. Blue eyes filled his vision. So close. When did he move? He tried to retreat, but another hand clamped down on his shoulder, holding him fast. Who was this guy? If you're having trouble with your quirk, I can give you a few pointers, same as I did Tenko. In the end, it's all about control. The smiling man held up a finger. See? As he spoke, it flickered with golden flame, yet spread no further than his index. You have to feel the power in you. Let it flow through you, grab it, and then control it. It's not hard. Go on. You try. It doesn't work that way. Frustration bubbled up in him. I already tried. That smile was all too kind. It hurt. Do or do not, there is no try. Shut up. Here at last, his emotions slipped their leash. Azure flame flared up, blazing impossibly hot. Panic flared with it. No. Control it. He'd burn himself. He'd burning everything. But he couldn't control it any longer. The inferno was free, and it surged forth. Schwip. Only to find itself absorbed. With a faint sucking sound reminiscent of a flowing breeze, the inferno vanished into the blonde's open palm. It didn't harm him, no, it was almost like he'd absorbed it somehow. Like that strange golden cloak of his had eaten it. What the hell? No one taught you how to control your powers, huh? The blonde man pursed his lips in mild displeasure. Come on, that's the most basic of basic. Here. He offered him his hand. Lem see your palms. Boya flinched, remembering his burns. I don't think that's a good idea. Naruto absolutely scowled. Hands, young man. It was such a parental thing to say, Toya couldn't help himself. He couldn't argue with him. Why yes sir. When presented with his burned palms, the man frowned. Calloused hands ran over his injuries, traced the charred surface of his skin. Well, nothing I can't fix. Hold still. Golden light ran across his palms, bringing with it a faint sense of itchiness. Toya found himself flinching, but there was no pain. None at all. As he looked on, his wounds mended themselves, the faint scent of cooked skin overpowered by an altogether more pleasant scent. Like the crackling scent of breathtaking smoke. There we go. Just like that, the blonde released him. All better. You how Toya grabbed at his sleeve when he tried to rise. How did you do that? What's your reasoning for this? Tenko huffed. Dad doesn't need a reason to help someone. He's a shinobi. It's what he does. Toya warbled once, a thin reedy sound escaping his teeth. Damn him. It was too much. He was just too nice. Just like that, the walls in his heart crumbled. This is the place. Yeah, old man. This is where I live. Don't go calling me old man now, Toya. You're family now. Dad was angry. Tenko knew it in Naruto's face, his smile, that slight twitch of the blonde's right eye as he frog marched them up to the Todoroki residence. Not angry at him, himself or even Toya really, but something else entirely. Given the apprehensive look on his new friend's face, he already had an inkling of what was about to happen. 3 guesses as to what that might be. First 2 don't count. Because you see, Dad cared about people. Maybe a little too much sometimes. Nothing wrong with caring. That was his choice and all. Tenko had no qualms with compassion. Being nice was all well and good, if it wasn't for Dad's innate kindness, they never would have met, and then there would he be. Out on the street starving to death, that's what. He'd probably be dead by now. Just dwelling on it made him shiver. Dad wasn't a hero, and certainly not a villain either, but something in between. Just a shinobi. Not afraid to dirty his hands if it came to it, and he had a feeling things would be dirty indeed once today was done. But he digressed. They'd arrived. Naruto reared back and thumped a fist against the door 3 times. On the third, he accidentally punched through the thin material. No, maybe that wasn't the right word. Punching implied deliberate intent. He smashed a fist-shaped hole through the door and immediately looked chagrined for it. Oops. Toya facepalmed. Tenko hid a smile behind a gloved hand. Oops, he says. A young woman with white hair and startled eyes peeked through the gap he'd left through the poor door. Why yes. Did you need something? Is Endeavor in? Dad's smile was flinty. I'd like to have a word with him. Todoroki flinched. Not at the moment, no. Great. He pushed the door open and nudged past her. I'll wait. Come along, Tenko. You too, Toya. Something was wrong. Todoroki Endeavor. Knew it at once, if only because every instinct howled at him the moment, nay, the very second. He pushed the sliding door aside and stepped over the threshold. There wasn't a single light on in the house. No, wait, he told a lie. There was something glowing over there in the corner, almost shimmering, really. I see you. Searing scarlet eyes met his in the dark. He jumped, blinked, scowled and scrubbed at his eyes with a fist. No one was there. Neither man nor beast. Had he imagined that just now? No. His heart hammered in his chest still, adrenaline spiking in his veins. For a second he could have sworn he'd seen a giant beast. A fox. He shook his head. Damn it, working too hard. Ray. He raised his voice. No response. Denji tried not to frown at that, failed to stifle the ember of irritation that sparked in his chest. Blasted woman. They weren't on the best of terms these days, but why would she outright ignore him like this? Had she already put Shoto and the others to bed? He conjured a flame to his fist and fumbled for a light switch, half expecting that to fail, too. It didn't. The light snapped on. Welcome home, Endeavor. There was a stranger in his house. The young man sat on his couch, one leg crossed over the other. He took him in at a glance, blue eyes and blonde hair, whiskered cheeks, attire that had seen better days. He smiled for him, but there was an edge to that smile, something sharp that likewise put him on edge. Who in blazes was this? A villain? No, he mustn't jump to conclusions, at least he shouldn't not. Only then did he notice who was sitting with him, or rather, opposite him. He scowled at her. Ray. Why did you let this man in? His wife quivered under his gaze but held firm. This man brought Toya home. Had he? I did indeed, the blonde smiled and gestured to an empty chair. Take a seat. I'd like to have word with you. Endeavor's brow drew down in a thunderous frown. Just who do you think you are? Who I am depends entirely on how you respond. Take a seat. Something in his voice compelled obedience, however briefly, and Enji found himself complying, sinking into a chair. He cursed himself a moment later. He'd given away his advantage. To rise now would only make him seem like a child, and he refused to give this oaf any more satisfaction than he already had. The blonde braggart smile suggested otherwise. He hated that smile. It reminded him of All Might, but sharper somehow, the grin of someone more than confident in their power, but also one unfettered by measly morals. In a word, dangerous. Great. The young man hummed. See, we can be reasonable. I'm Naruto. Nice to meet ya. I've heard well, not great things, but still, a lot about you. Your family had quite a lot to say. Pyre sparked. Did they now? Ray made a point of looking anywhere but at him. TCH. He'd have words with her later. Enji took a deep, slow breath to steady himself. Only then did he dare speak again. What is the meaning of this? Meaning, you say? The blonde smile became a touch more strained. Funny word, that. Let's discuss it. Your son nearly burned himself to death today trying to prove himself to you. I think that's meaning enough, don't you agree? His hurt stilled. Toya had been training again. I told him to stop. And how could he? The question was a dagger in his gut. You filled his head with dreams of being a hero, but that wasn't enough, was it? You only ever taught him to increase his heat, never to control it. How could he do anything but burn himself out? If it weren't for me, he'd be dead right now. Do you have any idea how hard he'd been pushing himself? If I hadn't patched up his quirk, he wouldn't be here. Wait, hadn't he said something incredible just now? You what? We'll come back to that later. The unnamed blonde dismissed his concerns as one might a student in class. Enji didn't much like it. I'd like to move on to the matter of your wife. Ray sat a bit straighter, clutching a pillow to her chest. Endeavor didn't fail to notice the sudden tension in the room. Now then, the intruder continued with that same implacable calm, I can't claim to understand quirk marriages, but ain't this a problem? You're not treating her like a person. He ran an idle hand through his hair as he spoke, concealing his eyes from view. You'd be amazed what people say when you offer them an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry on. And you're hurting her. His arm swept aside, revealing stark scarlet slits. I take issue with that. How many times have you knocked her down? The blonde barreled on, heedless of the landmine he just trod upon. How many accidents has she had, And for what? Defending her children. I don't claim to be the sharpest tool in the shed, but even I can see there's something wrong here. Enji burst to his feet. I don't have to take this from you. No, you don't. This villain, there could be no doubt in his mind, now looked up at him and granted him a curt nod. You can walk out right now. That's what you do, isn't it? A searing heat crept into voice, blazing like the sun itself to meet his own fire. You run away from your problems. When things get tough, you get going, don't you? That, or start swinging. Like a bully. His flames flared. You dare. You bet your burning beard I do. Blank red eyes regarded him intently. I can't claim to understand your motives here, but this isn't right. Stubborn pride sparked in Endeavor's heart and he bit his tongue to stifle an irritated snarl. The fool didn't understand. How could he? How could anyone understand his struggle? Surpassing All Might was all that mattered. If he made a few mistakes along the way, then so be it. Failures were to be cast aside. Weakness would be ignored, no matter what some might say. Sentiment had no place in hero society. Naruto looked away from him suddenly, distracting him from his internal monologue. Why don't you go check on the kids? Enji's wife didn't budge. It was the most spine he'd seen from her in some time. I'll stay here. You sure? Her gaze swung back to him. Yes. Endeavor's anger sparked anew. She thought she could turn against him, did she? Never. He wouldn't allow it. This is pointless. He took the initiative before that blasted blonde could again. I don't know what you want or who you are, but you're in the wrong here. Not I. You break into my home, threaten my children. Naruto, actually. And your wife let me in. His smile didn't waver in the face of the growl that followed. Not once. I haven't harmed a single hair on their heads. Nor will I. All I did was ask a few questions. The answers were illuminating. I asked Toya a question, too. NG didn't like where this was going. What kind of question? The vigilante tilted his head. I think you already know. He had an inkling, yes. It enraged him. Enough. Endeavor swept an arm before him, temper finally slipping its leash. I'll hear no more of this nonsense. You've no right to be here, make demands of me, tell me how to raise my family. Ha! A sharp bark of laughter startled him. NG's world went still. It soon proved the calm before the storm. Family? The blonde tilted his head. This isn't a family. This ain't even a proper home. Maybe it was, once. I'll give you what. But now. No. He shook his head slowly, blonde bang swaying side to side. Whatever it used to be before, I can see what it is now. Their eyes met. This is a prison. Ray whimpered into her pillow. The muscle jumped in NG's jaw, pounding alongside a vein in his temple. Broad, I've had it up to here with you. Good. The blonde surprised him by finally standing and turn. So have I. His chin rose in stoic defiance. You gonna shape up? Or do you plan to leave? Lust. Not. Kill. Because you see, Endeavor understood now. This little oaf was trying to goad him into a fight. Yes, that was what he wanted. If he slaughtered an unarmed man in cold blood, intruder or not, it would be all over the news come morning. The city loved its scandals and he could see himself now, plastered on the front page. He wouldn't allow it. I'll give you a third option. He rose to his full height, towering over the bemused blonde. Leave now. Do so and I won't see you thrown in a cell. Ha! Here at last a spark of anger slipped through the young man's facade, twisting his whiskered face into a scowl. You want me walk away? Ignore this. You're an even bigger idiot than I thought. Fresh fire sparked in Endeavor's fist. He saw it and scoffed. Alright. I can see it's pointless trying to reason with you and I don't want to burn your house down. Answer me one last question, then I'll be on my way. If that was the price to be rid of him, then so be it. Spit it out. Red eyes glared at him. Do you still think your son, Toya, can be a hero? The question nearly floored Endeavor. Even if his quirk had been corrected as this oaf claimed unlikely. It was much too dangerous. Both for him and his reputation. Perhaps that made him a coward. He'd already set his heart on making Shoto greater than All Might. Sure, the boy was young and still weak, but he would see that weakness beaten out of him. His youngest would learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Toya, however, he could never be a hero. Even if he tried to assume the best, he simply couldn't afford to split his time between them both. No, the answer was obvious. Toya cannot be a hero. He's a failure. It isn't his destiny. Fear. Endeavor felt it all at once, a tidal wave of killing intent burst from the blonde to smother him, an anger so powerful it nearly floored him outright. He managed to remain standing through sheer will alone if only just. Ray whimpered and clutched at her pillow, but he paid her no mind. He couldn't. Not with that thing glaring at him. Then you're a failure of a father. A parent stands by their child and helps them find their way in the world. He scowled as a tan finger jabbed his chest. If one path falters, they help them find another. Did you even try to do that? NG's world narrowed, vision tunneling to a single point. Who did this oaf think he was? How dare he? He'd half a mind to flash fry him no. He wouldn't throw the first punch. No doubt this oaf wanted that. If that was his aim, he'd be disappointed. No matter how much he might wish to, he wouldn't be the one to throw the first punch. There were other ways to harm him however, methods he'd pursue once this arrogant arse was well gone from here. I think we're done. Indeed we are. Naruto clicked his tongue and turned toward the kitchen. Tenko. Toya. You can stop hiding now. The faint sound of shuffling footsteps reached Endeavor's ears. And he saw. Toya stood there, his face carved from stone. Endeavor stilled. There was a boy with pale hair there and red eyes beside his eldest, but he dismissed him at glance. He had other concerns. Why was their son looking at him like that? Had he heard? He must have. Why else would he wear such a fearsome expression? I'm sorry you had to hear that. Here at last, Naruto's face softened. I'm not. I didn't realize my old man was this shitty. Language, mister. Toya rolled his eyes and mumbled an apology. Toya, wild rebellious Toya, who didn't listen to anyone. He listened. To this stranger. A fresh fracture etched itself into NG's mind. It shouldn't have bothered him so. But it did. That fracture widened further still when Naruto walked over to him and laid a hand on his shoulder. He didn't miss the way his son smiled at him. We'll be in touch. Naruto turned a point look over his own shoulder. You coming? What? Endeavor ground his teeth. Who the devil are you talking to? The crack became a fissure when Ray rose from the couch. Endeavor made a grab for her. "What are you doing?" She slipped free. "This is goodbye, NG." "No." She joined them. "No, no. This wasn't happening. No, no, no. Where are you taking them?" The blonde didn't even look apologetic. "You had your chance." He could feel himself crumbling. Ray. If she went with him, if they went to the police, she'd take the children. Take Shoto. And with them all his dreams for the future. And what would he have? Nothing. No, less than nothing. He's taking it all from me. Just like All Might. No. Worse. It was too much. The last fraying thread of his thought snapped. A single bound carried him forward as Naruto turned away. He swung a flaming fist at the back of his skull. Someone hollered a warning. Gold light sang. An open palm intercepted Endeavor's fist with liquid grace. 5 firm fingers bit down against his knuckles and wrenched them up. In a mindless fury he lashed out with the other, desiring nothing more than the complete and utter destruction of the man before him. Instead he found himself stymied as the other hand swept up, catching his free hand by the wrist, forcing a grapple. In the background he heard the boys gasp, saw Elle fall back on her hindquarters, but none of that mattered. Nothing. None of it at all. Because he heard the word saw the smile. That damned him. Gotcha. Endeavor struggled to extricate himself to no avail. How did you stop that? What kind of villain are you? Number 2 hero indeed. Naruto snarled, driving him back a step. You have a shitty attitude. And I'm not a villain or a hero. I'm just a shinobi. You cracked. Nope. Came the happy chirrup. I'm Naruto. A knee slammed up into Enji's jaw, breaking the deadlock to hurtle him through a wall. He staggered up, warding a wall of fire before him. Naruto crashed through it. Clenched knuckles swung down at Endeavor's face. His world became pure pain. Ray's thoughts were an incoherent mess. This was real, right? This was actually happening, wasn't it? She wasn't dreaming. Was she? Her heart hitched at the thought. If this was a dream, she didn't want to wake up. Aghast at the thought, she pinched herself just to be sure. The jolt of pain that shot down her arm soon proved as startling as it was satisfying. Real. All too real. She would have wept if all the tears hadn't been wrung out of her hours ago. The idea that someone would listen to her, stand up against her husband, what he'd done. She tried to speak, but the words emerged as an incho jumble. Because, Endeavor was losing. Badly. Aura. She ducked aside as Naruto smacked Enji through another wall, idly pulling Toya and Tenko, such good boys, towards the safety of the kitchen with her. Even then she didn't dare take her eyes off the slaughter unfolding before them. To do so now felt like a disservice, both to herself and the young blonde who'd just thrown his reputation down the drain for her. All to destroy the one thing person she feared above all else. The media would surely drag his name through the mud once they learned of this. And yet the sight of Endeavor's face twisted in surprise and pain. Ray would be lying if she said it wasn't a little cathartic. Clenched knuckles barreled into Enji's face. A tooth whistled free and stuck itself in the ceiling, such was the force with which he'd stuck. Once, she might have thought it a shame. Enji had been a better person in the beginning. Before Shoto was born. Before he gave up on Toya and began training him instead. Before his obsession began to consume him, before he became physical. Never before had that shown as much as it did now. His crimson flame warred with gold, and the latter overpowered him effortlessly. Burn all you like, but you'll never burn me out. Naruto waded in, blocked a flaming punch with his elbow, and smashed a knee into her ex-husband's nose. Endeavor's head snapped back, giving him the chance to grab his neck and whip him across the den like a rag doll. Come on. He brayed after him. Put up your dukes. I'm not done with you. Here at the last, Toya seemed to waffle. Oi, Tenko, are you sure this'll work? Tenko watched attentively. You don't know my dad. He's got this. You don't know mine. He's going to do something stupid. Sure enough, he did. Flash fire fist. Hell spider. Rasengan. The pained cry split the air. Tenko quirked a knowing brow at the decidedly Endeavor-shaped hole leading out to the yard. Like that. Toya clapped a hand to his forehead and squinted through high fingers. Ooh, that looked painful. Painful? Ray didn't think it was painful enough. More pain. More broken bones. Tenko winced. Toya. I think your mom's broken. She's giggling again. Broken? As far as Ray was concerned, this was payback. Endeavor proved himself surprisingly sturdy. Say what you would about his means and methods, but he could certainly take a pounding unlike any other. It should have annoyed Naruto, no matter how much he smacked him around. Enji Todoroki dragged himself up and came back for more. Indeed, he gave as good as he got. He should have been furious, yet he wasn't. For the strangest reason he found himself smiling as they traded blows. Well, trading implied some manner of equality in a fight. There was none. Not here. For every glancing blow NG managed to land, he delivered 3 more. There could be no question as to the outcome of the fight. It was a matter of when. Not if. Endeavor wouldn't break easily. Good. It wouldn't be any fun if he did. Every blow he rained down on this burning bearded bastard left a bruise, each a mark for him to remember. Stubborn. He'd break him down bit by bit. At the end of the day he didn't want to kill him, twisted as that might sound. Death was a mercy. You didn't learn from dying. No, he was going to beat him into the ground, shatter that arrogance, maybe even teach him a lesson if he could. Arg. Unfortunately, the latter was looking less and less likely given his subject's emotional state. Somehow, that made him smile even more. OLE. He swept his arm aside, diverting the flaming fighter as one might a charging bull. Endeavor hit a wall and smashed through it. Extricated himself in a burst of flame. Rounded on him now, eyes wild. Kill you? I'll kill you. Not like that, you won't. He dodged a wild lunge and tripped the flaming hero. Honestly, you're just getting sloppy by this point. Don't you see how pointless this is? What are you even fighting for, hey? Endeavor's fist flashed out as he fell, fingers sinking into the soil. It superheated and burst into molten slag, peppering him with debris. Best not get hit by that. Fire hurt. Burn still stung, no matter how quickly he healed. He flung up an arm and grunted in annoyance as the burning berserker made a blind grab for him, seizing his wrist. Fire burst in his face. He closed his eyes against it with a put-upon sigh. The heat hurt, but he'd experienced far worse in his day. Really, the Amaterasu put this paltry display to shame. Kurama gave him the mental equivalent of a sigh. Stop playing with your food already. Fine, fine. Still bleeding flames Naruto swung, backhanding the number 2 hero away from him with an open palm. Can't let me have any fun. Jab. Hook. Uppercut. He retaliated against Endeavor, but tactically, a boxer choosing his blows. Each hit was targeted. Every strike left his adversary gasping in pain. Liver. Lungs. Kidneys. A lead hook to the body, snaking around NG's guard to rattle his ribsage. Mean to debilitate, to break, but not kill. Endeavor folded like a wet paper bag. The kick sailed up and caught him in the chin, physically flipping him in the air before he fell flat on his face. Naruto found himself wincing despite having been the one to deliver it. Ooh. That looked painful. You done? Never. The former father righted himself with a snarl from the floor, fists burning. Flashfire fist. That's quite enough of that. Naruto stomped down on his back, grinding him deeper into the floor. Do you want to set the entire neighborhood on fire? Much to his surprise the man's entire body burst into flame, forcing him to recoil with a pained hiss. Endeavor rushed him, still ablaze. He caught an overhand swing and chambered a Rasengan into his ribs, one that sent him hurtling out the house proper. It was too much to hope it would keep him down. Endeavor's body barely bounced once before he righted himself in the yard. Flames sputtered beneath his back and set the grass ablaze, burning away the last of his momentum to force him back to his feet once more. A wild look flashed across his face as those bloodshot eyes fixated upon him once more. You filthy villain. So we've moved on to petty insults now, have we? He closed his eyes and paused to stomp out the flames he'd left behind, careful not to let them spread. Endeavor took the opportunity to close with him again. Beneath closed lids, blur orbs blazed into golden honey once more as he drew upon the natural energies in the air. How embarrassing for you. Flaming fists slammed into open palms once more. Haven't you learned yet? A gold iris creaked open, regarding him with a flat expression as held him at bay. I'm stronger than you. One of those hands tightened their grip and yanked. An awful pop filled the air. Endeavor yowled in pain. His right arm fell to hang loosely at his side, dislocated at the shoulder. In a single seamless movement Naruto swept the broken man's legs, both breaking their deadlock and leaving him hanging in the air for a crucial moment. Unbalanced by the blow, Endeavor wasn't able to course correct in time. Faster, too. The golden punch rattled Endeavor's ribs, launching clean through the fence and out into the street beyond. Time to wrap this up. Folks would notice at this rate. Really? He paused a stone's throw away and planted one fist on his hips. The only thing you have going for you is your size, and as I'm sure you know. He saw the moment Endeavor snapped. Felt the temperature spike. A hand thrust forward. Jet burn. Size isn't everything. He reared back and slammed his hands together, the resulting shockwave popped his ears and extinguished most of the blaze before it could hope to reach him. Even then some of it reached him, singing his face beneath Kurama's cloak. Did his emotions make the flames stronger? Something to consider. He'd have to add it to his notebook when he taught Toya. Oh ho. Already taking the kid in. If this bastard won't help him then I will. Said bastard looked to be on his last legs right about now. His left eye swollen shut, chest heaving, one arm drooping uselessly, flames sputtering. Even his knees looked weak right about now. He didn't have much left in him. Yet despite that, he stood. He'd give him points for determination. If only he could channel that determination somewhere else. Maybe he was a lost cause after all. Alright, Naruto heaved a sigh, shoulders slumping. I think we're done. He looked to Ray and the kids. If you want to round up Shoto and the kids, then call the cops, I can keep this booger subdued. His sixth sense shrieked a warning. Tenko cried out a second later. Toya wasn't far behind. Dad. Watch out. Blazing arms closed around Naruto from behind. He cursed himself for the distraction. Sloppy. Heat flared, singing his skin. Prominence burn. The pillar of fire split the night. Golden fire. Harama swelled around his shoulders in all his golden glory, snuffing out Endeavor's greatest attack like a blown candle. An attack that had scorched the very sky, visible for miles around, swallowed you by a giant fox. The irony wasn't lost on him. He took a tiny bit of pleasure in watching flaming hero sway on his feet, strength spent at long last. Is that all? Endeavor lurched forward. Enough. A cursory kick shattered the joints of his right knee, twisting it at a horrible angle. Enji buckled to a knee. He didn't scream. More points for him. Pity they weren't enough. What the hell are you? Endeavor growled at him, flames flaring fitfully in his face. How are you this strong? Just how many quirks do you have? Bingo. Those were the words he'd been waiting for. Look at you, wasted and gasping for air. Naruto forced a smile to his face and spread his arms. Remember these words, Enji Todoroki. A father always gets stronger when he's fighting for his family. I'm fighting for mine. He hooked a thumb over his shoulder to where he knew Tenko was watching, rapt with attention. My boy's standing right behind me right now. Cheering me on. But who are you fighting for besides yourself, Endeavor? The deed went still beneath him. Go on. Naruto let his grin gain a manic edge. I'm listening. Tell me. Who, exactly, is cheering for you? I don't hear a single soul. He felt the man's spirit waver. It's true that I'm not exactly at the top of my game these days. He straightened his back, producing an audible pop. I haven't had as much time to train, and being a dad's a full job, you know. But I can't give up here. Why, you ask? Because I have set a good example to live up to. The finger swung out, stabbing at the staggered hero. Remember this. A father. Always gets stronger. When he's fighting for his kids. Earlier you called me a villain, didn't you? Aren't you one yourself? Stop hurting your family. We have ourselves a voyeur. Eh? Naruto's sixth sense stretched outward at Kurama's words. Where geez, they're so far away. He heard a rifle bark in the distance. Miles away. His head snapped back. One shot. One kill. She wasn't cut out for this shit. Aina Tatsumi, Aka Lady Nagant, knew it. She'd been trailing this blonde bastard for days now. Follow the guy, he said. Tail him, they said. Find out what he's up to. Some guy with a powerful kid, someone who was damned hard to follow. And now, in. She'd spent the last 5 minutes setting up shop in an abandoned building, watching him through her scope. We'd gone to Endeavor's house, she had no idea, but she'd followed still. Waiting for the right moment, still trying to piece it all together. Or so she had been before all hell broke loose. The back of the house absolutely exploded and the yard beyond it burst into flame. No hiding that. She had watched the brawl that followed, the one-sided beating, with dread in her heart. She couldn't hear the blonde's voice from here. But she could read his lips well enough through the scope. 4 little words. She said them aloud. Stop hurting your family. She tightened down on the trigger. No. Don't falter. She was a cog in the machine, a pivotal piece that kept it running smoothly. A system with 2 sides. Front and back. A system that needed both sides to maintain itself. Obey, they told her. Comply. Do your duty. This is for the greater good. Your arm will uphold peace. Just thinking of it exhausted her. Hunting a good guy and his kid, for what? To preserve their same of a society. Because he could take villains down better, harder, and faster than All Might could. Because he interfered with the natural order of things. Ha. So fragile. A phony. A sham. A golden daydream seen through rose-colored glasses. In short, an illusion. But a necessary one. For now. What a joke. She'd begun to have her doubts even before this. Now they solidified. She was tired of this. So very tired. Sorry, kid. She mumbled under her breath. It's nothing personal, but a job's a job. She curled the strands of her hair into a bullet, loaded it, sighted down her scope and fired. It was a good shot. The round traversed the distance in an instant. Her maximum range, maximum firepower. Poor bastard never saw it coming. He was still towering over Endeavor's full in form when his head snapped back. Gone. Another life snuffed out, just like that. Would it never end? The blonde swayed forward. Wait minute. Why was he smiling? He'd caught her bullet between his teeth. His eyes met hers through the scope. As she looked on aghast, he stabbed a golden finger her way. Lady Nagant saw his lips move again. 2 words. You're next. He vanished a heartbeat later, a sizzling gold streak. Panic bleated in her chest, wild and fierce. I've been made. She tensed from her perch atop the rooftop, but no attack came. Had she overreacted? Even the best speed quirk would take at least a few minutes to reach her at this distance. Surely she had time to flee. Why yeah, she told herself. Of course she did. Definitely. Still, someone who could take down the number 2 hero and eat one of her bullets without batting an eyelash. Nope. Couldn't do it. Wasn't even gonna try, wasn't messing with a guy like that. Maybe the safety commission could send someone else. No, they'd have to. She'd made them see sense, because she wasn't dealing with this any longer. 9 seconds passed and still no reprisal. Was she safe? Did she dare hope? Her heart was still beating so damn fast. That's enough for one night. Lady Nagant blew out a breathy sigh as she stowed her rifle arm and climbed to her feet. All this work to deal with one guy, I'm getting real tired of this shit. You and me both. The glowing hand clamped down on her shoulder from behind. 5 firm fingers locked down onto her collarbone, fastening themselves in place. Her brain fizzled, any and all thoughts dying an ugly death, spiriting her courage away with them. No. No, no. No, no, no. It just wasn't possible. No one was that fast. Even the quickest quirk couldn't have reached her already. Aina froze. Looked up now, knowing full well who she would find waiting for her there. Naruto's blazing red eyes beamed back at her, narrow and intent, half-lidded with mirth. The bullet was still in his teeth. He spat it down at her feet. Crushed it under his heel. Nice shooting back There, he purred down at her. That hurt like hell. There could only be one proper response to such terror. Lady Nagant screamed to high heaven. This is your home. Ray Todoroki performed a little spin as she took it all in, trying to make sense of the manner all at once and failing. Tenko didn't miss the awe in her eyes as she stumbled about the living room. Good. Awe implied respect, and respect meant she wasn't likely to betray them anytime soon. Dad deserved someone who was loyal. After all they'd done for Miss Ray, she'd sooner cut off her hand than turn on them. It's so large. Tenko couldn't help but preen at that. It is, isn't it? This is one of the smaller safe houses. Toya's mother rounded on him, eyes practically bulging. He has more than one. Ransacking villains brought a sizable payday. Dad was loaded. He'd been happy with their meager life before, but maybe this wasn't so bad. Kinda nice, really. The idea of having a family again had never occurred to him, never mind someone like Toya. But now that he had one, he wanted to cling to this feeling. After all, they had more than Toya to look after now, didn't they? Never mind Toya's siblings, he was Fayumi, Natsuo, even young Shoto, only a few years old. Where did your father go? He shrugged. Dad said he had a spy to deal with. He took Toya with him to keep an eye on her. Ray quirked a pale brow. Did he now? Whatever for? Tenko shrugged a shoulder. Dunno. Well, I suppose he knows best. Then her gaze narrowed upon him. She frowned. My, your hair's a mess. When was the last time you bothered to brush it? Here at last, Tenko felt the ghost of a smile touch his face. I don't. Why ever not? Memories. He remembered. Him and Dad laughing, combs stuck in their hair, the mess they'd made. Dad ain't any good with a comb. Last time we tried, the house was messy for a week. Isn't? Ray booped his nose with one finger. You should speak properly. Sorry. He said. He's not the best with grammar, either. Clearly not. She huffed. Well, that changes now. As he looked on with mild confusion, Toya's mother sat on the sofa, reached into her handbag, and drew forth a comb of her own. She brandished it like a blade in one hand and… Sit. Tenko blinked. Did I stutter? Ray gave her lap a brief pat with her free hand. I said sit. I've already put the little ones to bed. A small, almost tentative smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. I may not be the best at it these days, but I'd like to think I have some experience being a mother. It faded a moment later, her facade faltering when he didn't budge. Would you rather I not? Something deep inside Tenko gave way. Ah. A sudden pang of realization hit him, causing his eyes to widen. I remember this feeling. It's just like… His legs betrayed him as surely as the air in his lungs. A short, sharp burst of breath left him in a little gasp. He clambered over and hopped up into Ray's lap before she could think to rise. She stiffened for all of an instant, then gently laid one hand down on his shoulder to steady him in place. Her eyes glimmered a bit. Hold still. With painstaking gentleness, she set to the comb to his scalp and went to work. It didn't hurt. Against all odds, Tenko found himself leaning into it, luxuriating in the simple familiar feeling. When she found knots, she gently tugged them apart with painstaking care. Within moments she began to humming softly, a strange nameless melody he couldn't quite recognize. It felt gentle. Nice. Safe. Ray patted his head. Good boy. He'd experienced this feeling once before. Before everything went wrong. Before his quirk manifested. His head drooped. Lips parted before a single word. Mom. Miss Ray absolutely squeaked. Tenko didn't hear her, lost in his own thoughts as he was. He tried not to think about his mistake these days. About the past either, because if he did, he'd end up dwelling on it, and that brought nothing good. The past was painful, but you can't let it define you. Best to focus on the present, Dad said, or better yet, the future. Right now, the future was looking bright. This was his family now. If anyone, hero or villain, tried to hurt them, make them sad, take them away, no. He wouldn't lose his new family. Never again. He would protect them at all costs. That was what Shinobi did. Rise and shine, sleepyhead. Nuo. Lady Nagant didn't want to. Kaine Tsutsumi certainly didn't. Her bed was nice and warm, and it was too damn early to get up. She groaned something to that effect and burrowed beneath the blankets. Strange. What was that clinking sound she just heard? No, not important right now. Ignored. She was far too sleepy to deal with this. Soft. Cozy. Mine. Everything must have been a bad dream after all. A finger flicked her face. Come on, lady. How long are you gonna make us wait? Aina didn't recognize that voice. Her eyes snapped open. Realization swam up from the murky depths, bringing with it a sudden, startling realization. This wasn't her bed. These weren't her walls. That wasn't her ceiling. The room was a pale pastel blue color, utterly bare of decoration, but for the futon in which she found herself. Memory rushed back in. No. She tried to sit up. No. But now, because he was bound to the bed, arms shackled behind her back. No. Her vision focused. There was a boy leaning over her, jabbing her. Toya Todoroki. Her mind rattled of the name. Good, you're awake. He continued to beam at her. Dad asked me to watch you while you were resting. And a good job you did. The door swung open, revealing the man in question. Naruto Uzumaki. Her target. The man she was meant to kill. Kinda glowered at him. He'd shed his prior garb for an orange turtleneck and black khakis, though those heavy boots of his remained still. She could still see the scorch marks etched into them from his fight with Endeavor. He had one hand hidden behind his back, holding a gun in hand, no doubt. Oh, right. I tried to kill him. No wonder he's angry. He'd caught her. Scared the daylights out of her. Now he'd come to finish what he'd started. Thanks for watching her, Toya. Naruto flicked a glance the boy's way, diverting her attention once more. You can play with Tenko now. I'm sure he's feeling lonely by himself. Eh? I thought he was with Mom. You're the only one he really knows here, Toya. That'll change. The boy grinned. I'll introduce him to my siblings. He'll love em. I'm sure he will. He tousled the boy's hair. Run along now. I'll come by to tuck you in later. Right. Color hit his cheeks. You better keep your promise, old man. Naruto quirked a blonde brow. Have I ever let you down before? The wild boy kicked at the floor, scuffing it. No. And I never will. The blonde patted his head, mussing his hair. Run along, now. You've got training tomorrow. It was like flicking a switch, the little flame wielder practically scampered out the room, barely pausing long enough to close the door behind him. There. The smiling man beamed at her anew as the boy's footsteps rapidly receded. We're alone. Now then, where were we? Red gripped Nagant's heart in a vice. She felt all the color drain from her face. This is it, then. He's going to kill me. He'd sent the boy away so he wouldn't see it. Was it all an act? Was he pretending to be a family man when he was secretly a killer at heart? She tried to move, but the chains wouldn't allow it. She could barely sit up, bound as she was. He sat beside her, still not revealing his hand. Did you sleep well? She glared bloody red daggers at him. If you're going to kill me, get it over with. Don't torture me. You've got an awfully fatalist outlook on life, you know. Naruto tilted his head. What would you do if I told you I was going to spare you? I'd call you a liar. Ah, but is this a lie? He swept his hidden hand out, drawing a flinch from her. Tada. Aina creaked an eye open. That wasn't a gun in his hand at all. In fact. Is that? Ramen. He offered the steaming bowl to her, chopsticks nestled against the udon within. Made it myself. Figured you'd be hungry after a scare like that. Lady Nagant lifted her chin. As if I'd accept food from an enemy. Her stomach growled. Well. Naruto waved the bowl beneath her nose. If you promise to behave, I would mind unlocking your arms and letting you eat this. How do I know it isn't poisoned? Don't be paranoid. He chortled softly. Would I really go to all that trouble? Naruto laid the bowl atop her thighs and fished out a key from his belt. Laid it in the lock, now. A quick twist of his wrist and she found her arms freed. "Thanks," she muttered, rubbing her aching wrists. "Don't mention it." His smile was disarming as ever. "I treat my prisoners humanely. Go on." He gestured to the bowl still nestled in her lap. "I'll wait until you finish." Aina knew she could have shot him then and there. She should have. At such close proximity he wouldn't be able to dodge, surely. No matter how fast you were, there was just no way you could evade a bullet, certainly not one of hers. At point blank range. One shot. One kill. She could nail him here and now while his guard was down. She'd be praised for it. They'd call her a hero. Grumbly. Her stomach complained. In the end hunger won out over duty and she attacked her bowl with vicious vigor. The ramen did not survive her assault. It was a massacre, plain and simple. She scarfed it down. Relished the taste. Oh gods. He was a good cook. The noodles were soft yet filling and broth melted on her tongue. To her shame, she almost found herself moaning, eyes fluttering shut in half-lidded bliss. She could get used to this. See? He beamed as she polished off the last of her meal. We don't have to be enemies. Aina set her bowl down, unwilling to rise to the bait before her. We really don't. Undaunted by her silence, Naruto dared to scoot closer. You tried to kill me earlier. His words stabbed at her very soul, a dagger biting into her inch by a bitter inch. I'd like to know why. She looked away, not trusting herself to meet his eyes. I had orders. You were deemed a threat. I figured. He bobbed his head. You seemed really sad after you shot me. Her head snapped toward his with an audible crack. Could he sense emotions? Crap biscuits. That was going to be a problem. Just how versatile was this quirk of his? Or did he have more than one? No, that shouldn't be possible. It couldn't be possible. He laid a hand atop hers. Would you be willing to tell me about your superiors? I can't tell you anymore. She tore her hand free. They'll kill me. He scoffed, utterly unfazed. Not if I deal with them first. You can't. She glared back at him. It's impossible. Even for you. Her words drew a low peal of laughter from him. Something's only impossible until someone does it. This is reality. The words sounded hollow, even to her ears, she barely believed them. That's the way the world is. Reality, huh? His gaze narrowed, sharpening into sapphire slits. This so-called reality you're so keen on would have left Himiko to rot in the streets. Toya's family was on the verge of becoming something horrible when I stumbled into him. If I hadn't happened along, they might have become monsters. He leaned forward, face dominating her vision. Tell me, is that the justice you espouse? The justice you believe in? That you strive for? Was it? She knew the answer. Blood on her hands. So much blood. Aina squirmed in her chair, thighs rubbing together. No. What was that? He set one hand to his ear. I didn't hear you. Her head snapped up to glower at him. I said no, alright, but what else can I do? You can trust me. He offered his hand with a smile. And here said smile faded as his gaze strayed down to her unbound arms. You can shoot me again. I won't force your hand. But you'd best be prepared for the consequences of your decision. Click. He didn't flinch when she pressed the barrel of her now transformed arm to his temple. His eyes met hers. Oi. Think very carefully before you pull that trigger. Beauty demanded that she ignore him. She was a cog in the machine. Cogs did not think. They did not feel. They simply acted. And yet her arm began to tremble. I've killed so many people. So have I. His admission, the frankness of it, chilled Kaina to her core. You talk about killing like it's something that needs to be done. He reached up and grabbed the barrel of her arm, locking it in place. Me? I've taken out plenty of people. Not because I wanted to, not because I took pleasure in it, or even because they left me no choice. Some people. He blew out a sigh. Some folks just need to be dealt with. Sometimes that means swaying them, sometimes sealing, and sometimes you just gotta end them. That's what I've been saying. She shouted at him. There's no choice. There is always a choice. Naruto growled at her, teeth gone sharp, eyes blazing red. You choose how to make the world right. Morals. Society. Bah. He snarled at her, fangs flashing mere inches from her lips. You decided what your justice is. Not me, not the society, and certainly not those stuck-up bastards who made you their gun. Her heart was beating so damned fast right now, Lady Nagant could hear it pounding in her ears, like the drums of a wild hunt. How? He'd seen the true nature of this world, been alone like her, and yet he hadn't lost it as she had. If anything, it seemed to have made him even stronger. Her eyes began to sting. Water now. How long had she waited to hear those words? For someone to offer her a helping hand. It's too late. She heard her voice warble, felt the first tear roll down her cheek. You can't save me. Who decided that? You? His fingers bit down on her arm. Stop doubting yourself. She could just imagine them now. The voices. Her superiors. You are our tool. You will obey. A fracture etched itself into her facade. Their right arm shall bring about true peace. The crack, now. Kill him. Execute justice. The fissure. If she killed Naruto now, those boys of his would be alone. Not just Tinko. And the Todoroki family he just saved, what would become of them? She knew the answer. They'd be swept under the rug, just like all the rest. There would be questions of course, but the HPSC would silence those, too. Just as they did all those who stood against them. Was this justice? She knew it wasn't. Her arm went slack. I can't do it. I know. He let go of her rifle arm and leaned over, wrapped an arm over her shoulders, then drew her head into his chest. She didn't resist him. It's alright. You'll never to take another life if you don't want to. That said, I have a proposal for you right now. Wanna hear me out? Nagant nodded. He told her what he wanted. Absurd. Absolutely absurd. Was that really all he wanted? For a reason such as that. Kinda hiccuped a little, scarcely able to believe what he'd just heard. You'd go this far. Such a mundane goal. He didn't want to rule the world or even burn it down. Laughable. Utterly, truly laughable indeed. The HPSC had been wrong about him all along, made an enemy of him for nothing. Her fingers bit down into his shoulders as she held tight to him. Idiot, what kind of hero are you? Or are you really a villain after all? Neither. He hummed into her. Just a shinobi. And I swear, you'll never, ever feel like this again. I never go back on my word. Kinda whimpered. He was hitting all her weak points, damn it. Every bit of trauma she tried to suppress. This blonde bastard, he tore right through it to reach the real her. It was too much. So go ahead, release it all. Let it all out. I'm right here. I won't say a word. The dam of her heart finally crumbled with a wilting wail. Lady Nagant buried her head into his chest. She bawled like a baby. Are you sure what was wise? She wasn't faking, Kurama. Naruto heaved a sigh as he opened the window. Those were real tears. She's all torn up inside. Ain't the tears I'm doubting. You just let her walk away. No consequences. I let Nagant go, sure, he grinned. But I never said where she was going. Two guesses where. HRRMMM? Wait. Oh. That's actually clever. Does she know you're using her as bait? Probably. Since when did you start using your brain? He scoffed and created a shadow clone. Since I had a family to protect. Said Doppelganger didn't resist as he began to disguise it, tugging up its hood and wrapping a dark mask round the lower half of its face. In the end, it was a matter of perspective. How did the saying go? One man's trash is another's treasure. Lady Nagant's organization might try to silence her for her failure here today, scrap her for failing their so-called ideals. Unacceptable. He wouldn't allow it. Not after she'd bawled like that. Follow her. He commanded it. Make sure she gets where she needs to go safely. A blink. And if she's threatened. She likely would be. Do what needs to be done and help her return safely. His clone saluted and shot out the window in a streak of gold. Naruto closed it behind him with a grim nod. Time to check in on Rei. You let her go? Just like that? Yup. Naruto bobbed his head in agreement and flung himself down onto the couch beside her with a hearty sigh. His smile was telling. Just like that. Rei Todoroki found herself somewhat concerned by the nature of his smile. It was the same one he'd worn when he thrashed Endeavor within an inch of his life and left her husband a beaten, broken man. That said smile was currently directed at the ceiling of their humble little hideaway, worried her to no end. The children were all abed at last, and they were alone. It was just the two of them down here in the den. She should have been excited by such, finally, a chance to speak with him in privacy without prying eyes or little ones running around underfoot. No distractions. No one to interfere. And yet. Rei worried. She worried a great deal. Why on earth wasn't he concerned? She could hear the wind howling outside, rattling against the trees, causing the house to creak. Yet for all that the room was warm, lit by a warm insulated hearth. Firelight cast flickering images about the room, causing their shadows to shrink and grow. His seemed so much larger compared to hers, so strong and determined, while hers flickered and faded. Don't worry. He smiled at her. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. Rei wasn't sure if it was quiet confidence or actual arrogance on his part that compelled him to say those words. Either way, his suddenly blasé attitude concerned her. He'd been downright determined earlier. Fierce, even. Why would he let a potential enemy go their own way, unless her eyes widened, and sure enough his eyes danced with mirth. Ah. She should have known. In the brief time she'd known him, Naruto had proven himself a man of many talents and facets, but stupidity wasn't one of them. She sat a little straighter on the sofa, regarding him anew. You converted her, didn't you? A wry smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not so much converted as convinced. Ray pursed her lips. Naruto. Miss Ray, he sang back, teasing her. Don't. She held up a hand with a wince. Please don't call me that. You'll make me feel old. Among other things. For better or worse, the chapter of her life, the time she'd spent with Enji, that was over now. Maybe things could have been better. Maybe she could have stuck it out. Maybe there was light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe their fractured family would have become whole by the end. She'd never know now. Naruto tilted his head. Just Ray, then. A faint hint of pink hit her cheeks, and she felt her quirk slip away from her for a moment, manifesting in tiny tendrils of hoarfrost beneath her fingertips. She curled her hands into fists to hide the slip. It was too much to hope he wouldn't notice. Mercifully, he didn't remark upon it. I would prefer that, yes. When he didn't challenge her request, opportunity knocked. She seized it. May I call you by your given name as well? Sure. The baffling blonde shrugged. Go right ahead. So informal. No, focus. She had another concern to address. That woman Lady Nagant. She knows where we're hiding. Nope. Ray blinked. Nope. His smile gained an impish quality. Means no. Used an old shinobi trick. You blindfolded her, didn't you? Oh, he recoiled with a laugh. You make it sound like I'm some kinda kidnapper. She smiled softly. All this banter made her feel young again. You can kidnap me anytime. Naruto's brow shot into his hair. Ray whined and buried her head in her hands. If her face had been pink before, she was certain it was gone scarlet now. No. She'd said that aloud, hadn't she? She hadn't meant to. A cursed tongue. This was what she got for running her mouth. She was still coming down off an adrenaline high. She'd be kicking herself come morning. Too late to stop now. Might as well go through with it. Lady Nagant, she peeked through splayed fingers, not trusting herself to look at him fully. What is she to you? A tool? No. He shook his head and her heart hurt to hear those words. She'll never be a tool for anyone again. His brow furrowed, darkened by some distant thought. She's done being their gun. A blink on her part. Her fingers fell. Gun. He steepled his fingers and laid his chin atop them. It's her quirk. Sounds frightening, and what of me? She looked up at him through her lashes and tucked a stray strand of pale hair behind her ear. What am I to you? What happens now? What comes next? He'd freed her from a dying marriage and spirited her away to safety. For that, she would always be grateful. But she had to know what followed. Did he expect her to bind herself to him? Did she want to? Not sure. He shrugged, and for a moment she wondered if he'd read her thoughts. I don't really know you. I'd like to think we're friends. Friends? Ha. Friends didn't do what he'd done for her. But they weren't more than that either now, were they? She didn't know how to define their relationship, or if there even was one. She didn't know what she felt for him yet. Her hurt was scarred, but he just might heal it. Things had been good with Enji too, in the beginning. Before he had gone sour. Before she'd made mistakes. Before they'd ruined one another. She wasn't sure she could ever trust someone like that again, even if she wanted to. Her duty was to her 4 children. She would bear these regrets and guilt in her heart. They would be her burden. Hers and hers alone, so that her children might never suffer them. And yet a voice in her heart bleated. It's not fair. Where's my joy in all this? Don't I deserve to be happy? To be held? To be loved? In hindsight, Ray wasn't being fair, she knew. Naruto's focus, his heart, was fixed firmly on his son, and only recently now, on Toya. In time he'd surely get to know Fayumi, Natsuo, and even little Shoto. He'd likely come to care for them as he did these two. He'd make such a wonderful father to them. Even if he could never love her. She could be content with that, even if hurt. Tenko seems to like ya. Ray's head snapped up with a jolt. She fumbled. Recovered quickly. And him. He's a good boy. He is. Naruto bobbed his head in a glum nod. He's been through a lot. Has he? She blinked. And his mother? She'd never considered it. Tenko didn't look a thing like his father. She might assume he'd inherited his mother's appearance, but she'd seen neither hide nor hair of any such person since coming here. It wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. The conclusion she came to wasn't a pleasant one. They were either separated, his mother was dead, or perhaps. Tenko ain't mine by blood. Naruto seemed almost chagrined to admit it, judging by the way he scratched at the back of his head. I adopted him after a certain incident. Blue eyes rose to meet her, and there was a shift in the air. It took me a while to tease it out of him, to figure out what happened. His eyes met hers again. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. His voice gained an edge that hadn't been there before, the warning rumble of a protective father. Can I trust you? She touched a hand to her bosom. Until the day I die. Naruto told her. Slowly at first, haltingly, but tell her he did. She immediately wished he hadn't. Tenko. That boy. That poor boy. How was he even sane? Do you have any idea how hard it is for him to open up to people? Naruto's gaze was cold as ice, colder than anything her quirk could ever hope to conjure. It took me ages to win his trust. And yet he willingly befriended Toya. And you. His eyes regained their lively luster. I hope you understand the level of trust that implies. He called me mother. The words burst out of her before she could think to hold them back. I would never harm him. Naruto didn't recoil. He was too strong for that. But he did pause. A rueful smile touched his lips. Did he now? Don't you think that boy deserves a mother? He does. A grim nod. He definitely does, but I really haven't had the time to look for oh. His eyes met hers widened. His face went red. Aha. Not so dense after all. Naruto, she realized, wasn't one to listen to logic, but emotion was another matter. Appeal to his heart and he'd hear you out. Oh. He said again, looking away. Never really thought about that. Ray found herself perking up. He hadn't. Good. There was hope then. Maybe not now, maybe not for a few years, but hope. Out whispered in her ear. He'll betray you. Just Enji. Once he squeezed a few children out of you. She tossed her head and shook it away with a growl. No. It wasn't like that. There had been extenuating circumstances with Enji, mistakes neither of them had been willing to face. Naruto would never go down that path. He wasn't afraid to discipline any children under his roof. She'd seen him with the boys. He was good with them. If there was a problem, he'd face it head on. He rose from the sofa now, no doubt looking to flee after that admission. Guess we should be getting to bed. Wait. Ray tugged at his sleeve before H could. Might I have a moment of your time? He dithered. What for? She guided him down into the seat beside her. Felt his hip brush hers. He didn't resist. Firelight flashed over his face again, casting half of it into shadow. His face was wholly unreadable. I have a proposal for you. Ray looked down, twiddling her thumbs for a moment to muster her resolve. If we're going to hide, don't send me away. She found it and raised her gaze, trying her best not to tremble as she might his eyes. Let me stay. Let me be Tenko's mother. Let me. She swallowed, hiccuping a little. Oh gods, she couldn't say the rest. She didn't care what he did with Lady Nagant or whomever. This was her chance. Her moment. Even if it wasn't love yet, it could be. Hopefully. Maybe. Someday. Feelings could flourish given time. Somehow, she knew if she let him out of her sight now she'd never have a chance. Nagant and any others who might follow would leap past her. The stars had aligned in this instant. If she let it slip. Let me be your wife. Naruto's jaw popped open with an audible click. Ha. Don't make me say it again. Ray felt herself wilt a little beneath his baffled stare. I don't think I can. You already have 4 kids to look after. Are you really willing to take on a 5th? She pouted. You said yourself you'd help with Toya. I did, didn't I? He granted her a rueful smile. But are you sure? I know Jack all about romance. There needn't be any at first. Neither did she apparently, having already ruined one marriage through her own inaction. We could give it time. His eyes flitted to her right hand. She willed herself to be bold and laid over his. Won't you at least consider it? His fingers squeezed hers. Ray took the plunge. We mentioned hiding earlier, until this mess with Endeavor blows over. She ran a hand through her pale hair thoughtfully. I'd like to suggest disguises as well. I'd considered growing my hair out, maybe dyeing it blue, wearing different clothes. That got a blink from him. Well, with your ice power you'd certainly be unrecognizable if you want to, go for it. I certainly intend to be by the end of this. She scooted a little closer. Speaking of recognition. Oh gods, her heart was beating so fast. Take the plunge again. The ANZAI. I never had a chance to thank you for what you did. She hummed softly. That was sweet of you. Here. Let me express my gratitude again. Naruto made no move to escape her. Warm lips graced his. Soft, slow, and lingering. He didn't respond even when she tilted her head to deepen the kiss. She could tell he was too shocked to react meaningfully. That was just fine. Shock was good. Better than rejection at any rate. She took wicked pleasure in his stupefied expression as she pulled away. There. She touched 2 fingers to her lips and licked them once, silently savoring the taste of him. I hope that expresses my gratitude properly. Naruto flushed. You really did. And I can hear you too up there. He called toward the staircase. Tenko. Toya. Bed. Now. Little feet scampered up the steps. I quit. Quite the audacious statement, given how beautifully blunt it was. The president of the Hero Public Safety Commission almost found himself somewhat impressed by the boldness of it all. Indeed, under any other situation, he might have applauded their arrogance. It was all but a declaration of war, an assault on everything he and the commission stood for. And worst of all. It hadn't even been delivered in person at that, but via proxy, by 2 words hastily scribbled on sticky notes slapped on his desk for him to find come evening. A casual screw you from one of his subordinates, someone who didn't dare face him in person. He recognized the handwriting. Oh yes, he knew it well. Lady Nagant. Even if he hadn't, she'd all but signed her name below it. The dishonor of it all. Not only had she failed to kill her target, but to think she would flee in such an unsightly manner. She could have silenced Endeavor at least. But she'd failed even in that. Worthless. Broken tools should be discarded. As she would be. Foolish child. He crumpled her note in his fist, growling under his breath as his quirk multiplied the force and broke it down. If that girl, if Kainetsutsumi, thinks for a single moment that she can merely step away from us without repercussions, then she is sorely mistaken. The lights died. No word, no warning. One moment he was resolving himself to track that traitorous wretch down in, the next he found himself plunged into inky blackness. Even the light of full moon from his office window vanished before his very eyes. It was as if he'd plunged into a deep pit from which there was no escape. And yet he hadn't the slightest sensation of falling. What was this? Where was he? Was this a quirk of some kind? A prank by one of his co-workers perhaps? What nonsense is this? His voice echoed in the void. Mark. Susan. Sally. Someone began to whistle. It echoed all around him, a low, ominous thing, yet almost peaceful in its finality. Stop that. He pivoted in search of it, to no avail. The source couldn't be found. It only persisted. I demand you cease at once. The hand clamped down on his shoulder. Mistakes were made. Yo. A low, feral growl echoed behind him in the gloom, warm fetid breath brushing his ear. You're not afraid of the dark, are ya? Fear. Mindless terror. Raw bloody dread. Those 6 sinister words summed up the commission head's existence in an instant. For an awful moment he couldn't think. Couldn't move. Blink. Breathe. Nothing at all. It was a man who had spoken, he was certain of that much, and yet he was also certain a monster was behind him. Yet he couldn't bring himself to turn around. He could not. He absolutely did not dare. Because if you are, he felt clawed fingers bite down against the muscle of his shoulder. Buddy, you're in the wrong line of work. The will to live is a powerful thing, it overpowered his fear, if only for a moment. He whirled with a wordless gasp, grasping for his assailant with his right hand. If he could just grab him, then. But nothing. The lights went up again. He turned and found himself alone. Bathed in moonlight, standing behind his desk, just as before. Nagant's note remained on the table, mocking him. Just a dream? The commission head wanted to believe it was. He truly, dearly did. And yet that awful feeling persisted. The whistling. That god-awful whistling. He collapsed into his chair, reached beneath his desk, and came up with a clear glass alongside a dark green bottle, 2 things he always kept handy. After a moment's fumbling he uncorked the later and poured. Rich red sake flowed forth. Red like blood. He tried to ignore that last thought, poured now, with trembling fingers. Alcohol would soothe his ragged nerves, surely. A bead of sweat ran down his brow. Nervous laughter bubbled up, and a harsh gulp of the drink chased it down. Doing so gave him some small semblance of comfort. Maybe he was working too late. This was a matter best left for morning, a deed done in daylight hours. Thusly fortified by his drink, the commission head reached for Nagant's note and made to destroy it. Pompous bitch, he muttered darkly to himself. I'll have her head on a platter. The lights flickered once more, briefly plunging him back into darkness. That was your last chance to walk away. The commission head glimpsed someone. In his peripherals. World, now. No one was there. Yet he'd seen them all the same. His heart hitched, pounding in his ears like a pair of twin drums, beating loud, louder, loudest now, until the racing of his own pulse was all he could hear. With that, the last fraying thread of his courage finally snapped. Show yourself. Silence reigned supreme. Nagant. He burst to his feet with a snarl, raving in his rage. Is that you? Enough of this farce? If you think for one moment that you'll get out of here alive. The muscle jumped in his jaw. Answer me. Crack. He didn't see the fist that struck him, but he certainly felt it. A mighty blow thundered into his gut and folded him clean in half. He doubled over with a wheeze, gagged now, and lost the hearty meal he'd eaten for dinner this evening. Even as he retched, a hand closed around the back of his head and shoved his face into the muck, filling his nose with bile. Fresh footsteps echoed behind him. I hear you like working in the shadows. That same rough voice hissed in his ear with the icy rasp of death itself. So I thought I'd meet you in them. Fitting, isn't it? He struggled, to no avail. That hand held firm, keeping his face planted in the vomit. I was going to make this quick. Painless, you know. But now that you've really pissed me off, we're going to do this nice and slow. The lights clicked on again. Bless that backup generator. Once more and the hand holding him vanished. He thrashed upright with a sputter and ripped a handkerchief from his coat pocket to clean his face. The intruder allowed it. No attack came. Arrogance on their part. Didn't matter. The commission head flung himself to his desk and slammed his hand down on the panic button beneath it. Guards. He mashed the little red alarm intercom furiously. There's an intruder. Someone. Anyone. Don't bother. The voice came on again. They've been dealt with. He smashed the button again, hoping against hope. No response. Down went the lights with a low wheeze. A hand seized him by the scruff his neck in the dark and hurled him away from the desk. His body struck the floor for all of an instant before a boot found his shoulder. Something wrenched in his collarbone, a dry wheeze fled from his lips as stars burst before his vision. No. No, no, no. Not like this. Why so serious? That same boot turned him over onto his back. You're not going to die yet. What do you want? Really? You're crying already? I expected more. You're the schmuck that messed with Lady Nagant's head. They stepped out the shadows, teeth gone sharp, eyes blazing red. Nice Tomicha. He'd made no effort to hide his face. Not this time. You. Me. A savage kick launched him across the room, where he crawled away like a drunken crab. Don't look so surprised. You knew this would happen sooner or later. Just as I know your kind. You treat your people like disposable assets, using them to do your dirty work until they just snap. The commission head flinched as the man snapped his fingers. Break. He finished with that same blinding smile. As for you, you remind me of someone who used people much the same way. His name was Danzo. Wanna hear how he died? A low chortle pervaded the ghastly gloom between them. Screaming, or so I'm told. It wasn't a good end. Death. This was death. He was going to die here. Hey, killing me won't change anything. The commission head tried to rally. Justice will prevail. Justice? For the first time since they'd met, Naruto's face lost its smile. Is this what you call justice? A fist whistled out, bloodying his nose. The commission head gurgled, only to find himself reeled in like a fish on a hook. What a joke. The system's broken. Strong bully the weak. Might makes right. Anyone who dares to oppose you finds themselves snuffed out. Take me for instance. I just wanted to live a normal life, but you guys just kept pushing. You see, you claim you fight for peace. For order. But you don't, not really. The hand grabbed him by his tie, hoisting him upright again, perilously close now. What you're really fighting for, well. A lone finger wagged before his face. We both know the truth now, don't we? You fight to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. To blind them. You're safe, you say. Listen to us, you say. Trust in us, you say. Like sheep. What happens when the wolves come? What happens when people like Lady Nagant finally say enough? Deny. Lady Nagant. The words babbled out of him. I haven't the foggiest idea who you mean. Why would I be interested in a failed? Gold light flashed. Blood spattered the walls. A squealing shriek followed. Her name is Kaina. Red eyes blazed in the gloom. And she's not here to stop me right now. I ain't in the mood for your brand of bullshit. You fiend. You won't get away with this. You won't win. The hand closed around his face. I already have. Time marched on, as all things do. Not quickly by any means or measure, but gradually, a slow bitter battle of attrition waged day by day. Naruto settled into something of a curious routine as the weeks melded into months. By day trained Tenko and Toya in the morning, fix lunch for young Fayumi and Natsuo who were warming up to him. Ha. Sweet, sweet progress. Come afternoon entertain baby Shoto and try to get him to walk with Rei. And by night he and Nagant sacked any villains they could find and robbed them blind. It was a strangely fulfilling cycle bar a few hiccups. As expected, news of Endeavor's defeat eventually reached the masses. Also expected was the subsequent cover-up that followed. Details of his missing family were kept under wraps for a time, if not by the HPSC then by others who wished to preserve the status quo. Some news outlets argued that more was afoot for a time and a reward was offered for their safe return, but soon enough, another spectacle occurred somewhere and the world inevitably moved on. Instead, the chaos he'd caused at the HPSC was blared for all to see. They deemed him a threat to public safety and order. Ha! In the end, Naruto wasn't all that surprised by the farce, though he was disappointed. It only served to further vindicate his views, validate the voracious villainy in society as a whole. At the end of the day, people loved a scandal, but they didn't want their precious worldview to be broken either. They'd happily close their eyes and ears to the suffering of others, so long as they were able to live in their perfect little bubble. It made him sick. You're thinking too much again. He glared at the newspaper and the headline. Maybe I am. It's been nearly 3 months. I'm trying to plan for the future. You can cut the head off a snake, but the HPSC is still around, and they've been quiet. Too quiet. The paper bunched in his grasp. I don't like it. We've been keeping a low profile, but we're gonna need more fun soon. Then go out tonight with Nagant and fleece a few villains. Easy, no. Easy, he says. It's getting harder and harder to find. How do I look? Look. Naruto tore his gaze away from the newspaper. What do you mean Rii? His words trailed off into a startled yelp, jaw popping open with a disbelieving croak as he saw Rei Todoroki in her entirety. In hindsight he vaguely remembered her mentioning a disguise for herself, but as days went by and nothing materialized after that first month, he'd assumed she'd given up on it. More fool he. She'd grown her hair out alright, but he hadn't expected her to go this far. Who could have? For he found himself looking upon a stranger, a dangerous woman wearing a black and white uniform with an open bosom and a matching cap besides. Long pale stockings sheathed her legs up to mid-thigh, leading into a scandalously short skirt that left precious little to the imagination. He tore his gaze away from the latter and willed himself to look her in the eye. It was still her. She disguised herself well and he had to squint to see it, but that was still Rei under the disguise, even if he couldn't quite comprehend it. Well. She planted a fist on her hip, opting for a weak smile. I worked hard on this. Then words came to find, fractured though they were. What did you do and how did you do it? SHHH. SHHH. She hissed at him in a panic and frantically, and pushed a finger against his lips to solace him. You'll wake the children. I just put Shoto down for a nap. You. Naruto nearly shouted, paused, took a deep breath to steady himself, then whispered fiercely. Your hair. Blue. The words babbled out of him. Eyebrows too. How? She'd mentioned dyeing her hair but to go so far. It washes out. Rei waved her hands frantically. I checked. Twice. Naruto heaved a sigh, letting his panic bleed away. Good. Aye, that's great. It is, isn't it? Do you? She squirmed a little under his intense gaze, like my hair. When it's normal, yes. His tongue ruthlessly betrayed him. He realized what he'd said a moment later and his face burned all the more for it. Her eyes locked onto his. Sorry. I'm just not used to this disguise of yours. Rei's meekness vanished for a moment, replaced by pleasant surprise. That's good to know. As for a hero name, I was thinking Esdeath. The blonde brow rose. Sounds ominous. It's meant to be. She puffed out her cheeks with an adorable huff. Almost made him want to pat her head, it did. I want this disguise to be as far removed from the real me as possible. It's better that no one recognize me in public. If they do we won't just have what's left of the HPSC to worry about. Well, he couldn't deny that. They'd have heroes and villains on their arses, all looking to collect the reward money. How long did it take you to put that outfit together, exactly? She looked away and twirled a strand of azure hair around her pointer finger. Scently. He frowned. Come again. I finished it just the other day, alright, she whirled away with a huff. It took me a while to get in touch with my contacts, let alone acquire the materials I needed. The remark stung a little. She'd done all this without him. I would have helped you know. Rei heard the hurt in his voice, bless her. I know. She laid a hand on his. But you've already done so much for me already. I wanted to do this myself. Something to help you, even if only a little. I see. He really didn't, but if this was truly what she wanted, what made her happy, then so be it. He'd grown not quite comfortable around her, not yet, but used to her. Those were the best words he could think of. They were still sounding out the finer points of this relationship, but judging by the way her eyes lit up, he had the distinct feeling he'd just taken a step in the right direction. You needn't worry. She dared to reach out and thread her fingers with his. Disguise or no, I'm not going anywhere. She stood up on the tips of her toes and kissed his cheek. He shivered and pulled her closer. The harsh crash echoed upstairs before they could go any further, punctuated by a shout. Dodd. Toya's voice wailed from the game room, Tenko won't give me a turn on the console. Bullshit. Came the indignant squawk. You've had it for the last 2 hours. Have not. Have to. Nah. Yaha. Rei patted his arm with a soft smile of her own. I'll handle this. It'll be a good chance to surprise them. Naruto palmed his face to hide his sigh as much as his smile. Don't scare them too badly. He looked up to find the tail end of Rei's long hair already disappearing upstairs. That settles it. She's a keeper. Someone knocked on the door before he could agree. Huh. Naruto craned his neck toward the sound. Wonder if that's Nagant. The knocking intensified. Hello, Hello, a cheery voice chimed through the wood. Is anyone home? Not Nagant. Definitely not Nagant. She wasn't that chipper. Still, he didn't sense any ill intent. Hold that thought. Naruto paced towards it with a lazy sigh, unlocked the door, and swung it open a crack. Hello, someone thrust their face at him. You wouldn't happen to be Uzumaki Naruto, would you? It took me an awfully long time to find this address. He found himself face to face with a rather outlandish individual, a young woman unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Long pale lilac hair swept to her right side, full lips quirked in a faint smile, contrasting nicely with her blue skin. Even her eyes were unusual, in that her sclera appeared completely black, whereas her eyes were a vibrant, lively green. Her outfit was just as vibrant, she wore golden earrings, a navy blue shoulderless dress, and an X-shaped belt with a circular buckle around her waist, alongside an unbuttoned salmon-colored jacket with black fur around the collar. All in all she made one think of a model, straight out of a magazine. Which begged the question. Why was she here on his doorstep? And you are? Curious. She stood on the very tips of her toes, straining in her boots to get a better look at him. He nearly laughed despite himself. That's clever of you, but I'd prefer your given name. Tit for tat. She snapped her fingers. I'll tell you mine if you give me yours. You already know it. Truly? His response earned a bemused blink from her. You really are bold, not bothering to hide your identity. Suppose that's one way to greatness. Chidasukuzuki, she sketched a curtsy, at your service. Might I have a moment of your time? Lady, if you're here to sell me something, I ain't buying. Ha. That drew a rich laugh from her. I see your instincts as sharp as that tongue of yours. But here you are. She raised her hands not to attack, but to form the crude shape of a square, framing him within as though she were taking a photo. The man who beat down Endeavor. He who makes a fool of this so-called society, hiding in plain sight. You're everything I imagined you would be. Kurama snorted. Seems you have a fan. A muscle jumped in his jaw. You're not winning a lot of points with me right now. Sorry about that. Much to his chagrin, the strange woman apologized. I tend to get ahead of myself with these things. Allow me to be frank. Can I get an interview? Ah. His face fell into a deadpan. She was one of those people, then. You can get lost instead. He closed the door in her face. Wait. Her voice peaked into an adorable yelp as she thrust a foot into the door to stop him, followed by an actual cry when he crushed her boot. Just hear me out. We're on the same side. He scowled at her through the crack. And what side is that? The only side. She babbled on. The right side. When it became clear that he wasn't going to let her through, she wriggled an arm through and waved a business card in his face. He dodged her attempt to plant it in his pocket, much to her annoyed pout. I'd like to invite you meet a few like-minded individuals. They're just like you. Neither heroes nor villains. What was she implying? On a whim he asked a question of his own. Does the word shinobi mean anything to you? An innocuous blink followed. No. Did he? For a moment there he'd almost hoped no, it didn't matter. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Evidently she disagreed. Do you really think you can keep them safe forever? The door smashed open. Naruto barreled through, grabbed her shoulder, and blurred. Curious had all of an instant to blink as reality reasserted herself. Uo. Is this another one of your safe houses? Did we teleport just now, or are you really that Fyak? You said I can't run forever. His hand closed around her throat, gripped, and levered her into wall, followed by the floor. Threaten my family like that again and you'll sleep forever. He expected a struggle. Resistance at the very least. Perished the thought. The eager reporter didn't even try to stop him from choking her out, she only raised her hands and smiled at him. As though he weren't considering killing her. We saw what you did to Endeavor and rest assured, we have no intention of aggravating you. But you need allies. Resources. We can provide that. And what do you want in return? What anyone wants. Curious grinned, voice gone hoarse now. Answers. I want to know who you are. What motivates you, everything about you. In the end, that smile convinced Naruto, if only because he felt the purity behind it, the single-minded to desire to see the truth and grasp it with her hands. Naruto let her go. You're the key to all this. To everything. She lay there on the porch for a long moment, idly rubbing her throat with one hand, before clasped the other behind her back to leverage herself upright. Her point gained, she leaned forward to beam at him. I only need a moment of your time. Nothing more. His brow furrowed. Lady, you're one strange reporter. So I've been told. Her grin gained a merry edge. You're more than just a story. You're the story, one that'll turn this world upside down. You're insane. She winked his way. I prefer the term thinking creatively. Creatively insane, then. I literally could have killed you just now. And you didn't care. Meh, a good story's worth dying for. When he hesitated her grin only grew. You don't have to decide now. I'll give you my contact information. Once more that card came out, this time, she had the gall to tuck it into his jacket pocket. You'll realize you need us, sooner or later. In the meantime. Naruto felt his brow furrow once more. In the meantime. Curious held up her phone for him to see. How about that interview? So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.